You're watching Analysts After Dark, an underground hideaway where insatiably curious analysts examine provocative project problems, share salacious secrets, and establish a covert network of co-conspirators. Step into the dark with your hosts, AJ Hawley and Steve Jones.
Well, hello, Steve.
Hello. We're stepping into the dark.
Oh my God.
A little darker.
It's been a minute. We've had some technical issues getting this show up and running. So most of it was around the time zone conversion. The tool that we use, it takes the time zone and makes it into the UTC time, right? So out of just the, is it universal coordinated time? Sure. And so then trying to convert that back to standard, it was an issue. And so we've gone around, we're about 20 minutes late than we usually start this, but luckily it'll be worth it today.
Absolutely.
So how have you been? What's new?
New employee start.
Oh, nice.
So it's been a lot of fun trying to get all the logistics together in the office, and starting it's a lot of fun, and we have reasonable expectations. We know it takes a while to get through all the training, and then most people want to start a new job and hit the ground running.
Yeah. Well,
we set expectations pretty early in interviewing. We say we want you to hit the ground and walk, because it's a mountain to get up there. So we have realistic expectations. Talk to us. We'll have fun.
Now, when you onboard somebody, do you get their desk all ready and have everything ready to go? Or is it more kind of a build your own adventure type of situation?
Not the build your own, not the latter. So we do get the desk set up, a couple big screen monitors. We go with a laptop because we need to go between rooms, project stuff. Sometimes the applications are just on our computer, so we need to be able to project that in the conference rooms.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's always fun. Always an adventure trying to get it all together and get all the applications and the access.
Yeah, I've had that latter scenario a couple times myself, where it was I walked in and I think that they were surprised that I started that day. And so they give me somebody else's laptop that had the job before me. And I go, oh, here's the desk. And there's like this much dust that's on the top of it. I was like, cool. As we've talked about before, I'm kind of a germaphobe. So then luckily I have wipes in my little, consulting bag. And so I wipe all the desk down. And then they said, oh, here's all the monitors and the monitor stand and everything else that you need. And they're all brand new and they're all in their packages. So like I spend the first 4 hours going, obviously in dress clothes because, business casual, whatever. And so I spend the next 4 hours putting all my stuff together, running the wires behind all the stuff, cable management is important to me as well. And by the time that I get done, they're like, have you started anything yet? I'm like, that's not my fault. That is 100% on you guys. And like, do you want to go to lunch? And I'm like, yeah, sure. I'll go to lunch with, pit stains and dust all over myself, whatever.
Yeah, I think my worst experience was not getting a computer for the first week.
Oh.
And then waiting another 2 weeks to get a phone.
Yeah, that's rough too.
Yeah.
That's a rough start. It doesn't set you up for success. And I feel like it's one of those things that it's indicative of the organization, or at least like the team that you're going to be working with, right? So it's like, are they like this with everything? Is it more, just ragtag, we're putting things together, or is it more we are prepared, we're ready to go, and then you're going to hit the ground at least walking?
Yep.
Yeah,
you definitely learn about the dysfunctions of the team if things aren't set up when you get there. So yeah, I definitely agree with that. So you need someone to kind of shepherd that before they start.
Luckily, tonight with us, we have one of those individuals. So we have with us Michael Hauck. He's proud to be one of the founders and owners of the consulting firm Congruent X and serves as the Chief People and Experience Officer, a title which he definitely did not make up in that role. So following a stint in the U.S. Army, he has now been in the business industry for 35 years. His experience has been about 60-40 between working for a consulting company in some capacity and working in corporate America. Early in his career, he became a trainer, and somewhere along the way, he learned that he gets more satisfaction from helping people versus focusing on just implementing technology. So with that, let's welcome our guest, Mike.
Hi, guys.
Hi, Mike.
Hi there.
Thanks for having me.
First of all, thank you for being so patient with our technical difficulties. I know we're getting on it a little bit, and it was like, okay, we're 20 minutes into this. What kind of ragtag show are you guys running? Like, yeah, it's after dark. You know what happens.
You know, it was a long time ago that I was in the Army, AJ, but there's still a lot of lessons that I learned that I use on a daily basis. And one of the things you hear in the military all the time is hurry up and wait.
Yes.
So, no big deal.
The other thing, so I've hung out with people that, so I didn't serve myself. I hung out with people that had, and then they said, you know, you get a nap wherever you can. So I was happy to see that you weren't snoozing in the green room there as we were waiting. So I appreciate that.
Unfortunately, I never learned the skill of sleeping with my eyes open like some people. So, yeah, I was with you. So, well, I wish. I'm jealous, Steve.
That does take us to our first question. So our first question that we sometimes remember to ask everybody is, what is your favorite after dark activity?
I guess, you know, I'm you know, I was thinking about the intro, right? The intro that you guys use, because, you know, sadly, you know, I'm still at that point where I waited until much later in life to have a family. And so I've still got two at home. One is out of the nest, and two are still at the nest. And like a lot of people who work in our profession, we work a lot. Mm-hmm. So I don't feel like I ever get enough time with my kids. So most of my after dark activities revolve around my family. And unless my wife can encourage me to leave the kids at home and go do some actual real adulting kind of stuff. We haven't done it yet, but just because it lines up with the title of your show, I did get a gag gift for Christmas, which is Dad Jokes After Dark.
All right.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, well, yeah, I opened it and looked at a few, and we won't be sharing any on the show tonight. Sorry.
I actually have that game.
Do you?
I really do. First of all, I love that whole premise of asking somebody a question, you stay straight faced, and then, you know, I love that. There was a Canadian comedy show that was, I think it's Don't Make Me Laugh. I'll have to look it up. And it was comedians in a room for 8 hours, and then if they win, then whatever the proceeds are goes, like $100,000 or whatever, goes to their favorite charity, right? And it's absolutely amazing. So it's a whole room of just hilarious people all trying to make the other person laugh, and if they do, they get booted, right? But it's one of those things that I love, and I love the dad joke off, or what was the contest? Yeah, and hilarious. But I also have that game, and I've read some. We played it in a brewery with some of my friends, and I was afraid to say some of those things out loud. It was like, oh yeah, we're not going to do that.
You were afraid.
Correct, Steve. Wow. Correct.
That's at a whole other level then.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Like, oh, we don't use that word. That, and for me to say that, I feel like is one of those situations where it's like, okay.
Yeah. I would definitely lose in the first like 2 minutes if I lasted that long.
But you gave me a really good idea, AJ, because I always talk about, again, it's a little tangential, right? But when I'm training people to become consultants, I always talk, as a consultant, you kind of have to have that poker face when you're in front of the customer, because sometimes customers say things and your initial reaction is to make a facial reaction that you probably shouldn't make. And it's a learned skill, right?
Can I share one since we're talking about After Dark?
It's your
And-
show, man.
Oh, well, this one's probably going to get me in trouble. And I don't think I've ever shared it publicly. So I was working with a client. So speaking of that situation, and we are, I don't know, second day in maybe, and there's 5 of us and a whole bunch of the client's staff and the high level too. They're always like directors or, you know, senior people. And they have these issues with it was transportation. So these issues in some of their transportation areas. And so they were trying to get that last mile. So between the warehouse and someone's house, right? Well, if there's traffic or if it's bad weather or whatever, they have issues with that, especially if there are issues with refrigeration or they have like timely things that need to be there. They call those hot loads, right? And so I'm sitting there and I'm 12 in my head and I'm thinking, wow, no one's laughing. No one's even smirking at that. Like, that's hilarious. And I looked around the room and I'm just like, all right. And then they keep saying that over and over and over again. And I'm like, man, that's a rough one to just like maintain professionalism.
Yeah, unfortunately, I have a couple similar stories, but we won't go down that path for the sake of time.
For the sake of time. Yes. So talk a little bit about that, Mike. So you train your staff as you use the term business liaison. Actually, let's go back to your role first before we go into that. You are the Chief People and Experience Officer, which, as I joked, was a title that you definitely didn't make up.
Maybe.
But you did.
I did make it up. Absolutely. And it was intentional. You know, when people hear the term Chief People Officer, they immediately think that you're responsible for the people at your firm. And that is part of my role, right? But the experience part to me is, as a consulting firm, our role is to bring value to our clients, right? For them to have a good experience with us. And so when I think about experience, it's, you know, the employee experience for my team, it's the customer experience for my clients, and even partner experience, right? If I bring a partner in, partners working with us, partners giving us leads, it's how to make it easier and better for them, right? We want a win-win relationship kind of thing. So you put all those together and it's kind of, I call it, or we call it, human experience, right? Because at the end of the day, we're all people. So I thought by putting those two things together, it made it a little bit broader than just thinking people in my team only. At the end of the day, as I said, I learned somewhere along the way that I get a lot of satisfaction out of working with people, getting to know them, understanding what makes them tick, and how to best communicate and collaborate with them. Doesn't matter who they are, who they work for. So if I can help, I'll try and help.
Yeah, I think the employee side and then even the client side is one of those areas that most HR / individuals in your role would be focused on. The partner one to me is more nuanced, I think. I've not seen a lot of organizations work on that level at the same or with the same level of intensity that I think you would.
We get a lot of our business through partners, various
Mhm.
partners, lots of different ones, some big, some small. It's important to us, and I, you know, we don't want to compete with our partners, but we also want to be aligned with our partners. And again,
Yeah.
whether it's their client and we're helping them provide services to their client, or whether it's our client and they're helping us, I don't want the client to have a completely different experience when they're working with, you know, the partners team versus our team. And so I think it's really important to be, you know, close with your partners and understand each other's culture and the way that you want to work and everything else to try and mitigate the gaps and make the experience as smooth as possible for the client. Because at the end of the day, we're both trying to serve the client.
Yeah, and I think that makes sense. Go ahead, Steve.
I hope so.
Yeah, I mean, all sides benefit when there's a consistent, cohesive experience.
Yeah,
that's the intent anyway.
Yeah, so going into that, so like that's you got this kind of trifecta of the people, the client, and the partners that you are working with. So tell me a little bit more about the business liaison side of that and how you train those versus what we would consider traditional analysts.
So, and like a lot of things these days, right? It's maybe more of a terminology thing, but it's intentional. Because I think, if I said, to the two of you, right? Because what I don't want to do is offend anybody, whether it's you or your audience, right? But when you think about business analysts, right, and the classical business analyst position over the years, I think if I look at the extremes, right, you have people who went into business analysis because they're very analytical and they want to dissect a process, and really they may not be extroverted in nature, right? They want to focus on the process, right? And that's important and that's valuable as a business analysis skill. And then on the opposite end of the spectrum, you have people who come in and they really want to talk to the business and listen and learn from the business and everything else. And it's almost more of the social aspect of just building that relationship with the business and trying to translate between the business and IT. And to me, a business liaison is, along that line, but it's a little bit more slanted towards the business side than the IT side. Doesn't mean you don't have the same skills, but what I've seen is that most of the people who are effective in a business liaison role in a corporation are people that have worked for the corporation, often in many, many roles. So they've done the job, and so they get instant credibility with the people in the role because they know and understand and can be empathetic. But those people also have to have that ability to translate and work with IT, right, in the IT side in order to help solve the problem. I think what happens a lot, and what we're trying to do a little differently, is not just focus on using technology to solve the problem, because at the end of the day, who uses technology? People do, right? Technology's supposedly here to serve us. And so we think it's really important that it has to be a cohesive effort to both shape the technology and the people at the same time. Now, if I said to the two of you guys, you have your choice. You can convince a set of users to do their job differently, or you can change the system to work differently. What's easier?
Changing the system.
Changing the system, right?
Yeah.
And so people innately focus that way because it's the easy thing to do. Nobody wants the hard part, right? And we think that that's where the big miss is, right? Is that there's not enough focus on the change aspect and helping people understand why, and the fact that the changes that we're making are actually going to help them do the job. And there's a cadence that goes to that. There's an awareness of your audience, right? Are they change receptive or change adverse? All of those things factor into somebody's success. And so we think having somebody in that role within the corporation, not our team, right, but within the corporation, that's what we want to focus our efforts on. One of my partners, our CEO, likes to use the term the head pin from bowling, right? If you can get that person and work with them and get a good cadence going with them, leverage what they know of the organization, you're more likely to be successful in implementing that change, whatever it is.
So you're basically identifying the bellwether and converting them.
Trying to, yeah. Yep.
Yeah, I know a lot of times in my earlier career, I would go in and so Mike and I, you and I do the same thing. Like we're in the same industry, right? And so developing Dynamics or CRM projects and Power Platform now, which is, kind of extended that, but coming in doing like customized CRM solutions, right? And so earlier in my career, I would be kind of pushed into a big boardroom full of all of these different execs and directors and things like that, saying, here's what we need. We need to have more insight, more metrics. We need to have more reports, more this and this and this, because that was exactly what they needed to get their job done, because they didn't understand certain aspects of their business and they wanted more clarity. They wanted more, just visibility into the work. So you'd have that meeting first, and then you would have the next meeting with the people that are the individuals doing the work, and they're saying, well, we work in 7 different systems that don't talk to each other, that we have to copy and paste from A to B to C, and then we also have to manually track all of our notes here and then over here, right? And so that we don't have time to give any of these other items. And what I think you're saying is, if you understand that situation from the person using the application, then you can have those conversations that it's like, oh, well, if we solve for this technically, you can still get some of those things at the director, senior level, et cetera.
Yeah, and to your point, AJ, what happens a lot of times is there's that complete disconnect between what leadership wants and why they're investing in the change, and what the users need to be successful, right? And for a decade or more now, right, people have talked about specifically with CRM, right, that only half the time a CRM implementation is viewed as successful. That doesn't mean you didn't go live. It doesn't mean the system doesn't work. It just means, did we get out of it what we wanted?
Sure.
And what we see a lot of times when that doesn't happen is partially because of that disconnect, and partially because of that, the old analogy of the carrot and the stick, right? You have some organizations that are trying to lead those users to the right place, and then you have some organizations that say, hey, we spent $1 million on this system, you better use it, right? If you didn't do it in CRM, it doesn't count, right?
Yeah.
Those kind of things. And we believe that the best way to increase that effectiveness, and when people talk about adoption all the time, is, well, give them a system that makes their job easier or more effective, right? Which doesn't necessarily directly align with what leadership wants. But at the end of the day, if the users aren't using the system, they're not putting data in, or they're putting garbage data in because they have to populate these 10 fields to get to the next screen, leadership's not getting what they want anyway.
Right.
Right. And so you can't ignore leadership, of course, because they're paying for it. But to help them understand that the best way for them to get what they want is to focus a little bit on the users and realize that I'm not really disrupting, as a leader, I'm not really disrupting your job, but their job, I'm absolutely disrupting. Right. So let's talk about how we can help them. And again, that business liaison role, who may have sat in that seat and truly understands what they're going through, our experience is they're most effective in helping the organization understand that focus on that end user and making their world better, and how that actually drives to the outcome that leadership wants.
I'd get in trouble a little bit because I would come in that second meeting, and I would ask them, what do you hate doing on Monday mornings? And I would ask just like that. And then, there were people in my organization that would kind of, give me the side eye, like, seriously, man, come on. But the thing for me was, if we asked that question, that was the low hanging fruit generally, that you'd be able to turn those individuals into people that were excited about it, because they're like, oh man, in the first the first week or iteration, whatever it was, you were able to solve this problem, or you could show, like, you just do a prototype, like, oh yeah, so this is already solved. Now they're excited because now they see the what if, right? So then you get those people excited, which then, to me, raises that up to that leadership role.
And it builds credibility, it builds trust. And to your point, now they get excited and they're more receptive to your ideas, and they're more likely to share with you, right? So it's that snowball effect, is if you can get in and do something quickly. And again, I don't want to turn this into a commercial, right? But if you go onto our website and you look, that's the way we do our onboarding. When we talk about it, we do our onboarding and we do design thinking. And coming out of the design thinking, what we do is we focus on literally just a handful of quick wins that we can do to help the business to get that snowball rolling. And that's, what our onboarding is. But it's exactly what you're talking about, AJ, is if you come in there. Now, again, the important thing is you can't ignore leadership. You have to help leadership understand why you're doing it, right? And so what we do with that is we focus on the ROI and the outcomes that the business as a whole expects out of whatever work we're doing, right? And if we make sure that they're clear on what we're trying to get to, and they understand that we're here to help them get to whatever that business goal is, that next level, right? Whether it's, decreasing call time in a customer service center, or whether it's increasing sales or pipeline or whatever, we have that aspect to it, and then we have the end user aspect of how do we make their day job better for them.
And that what do you hate doing Monday mornings is definitely one that will get engagement. And that's one of our toughest challenges as business analysts or liaisons is getting engagement. And
Absolutely.
sometimes it's like, what annoys you? Not as effective as what do you hate doing Monday morning? And I have used that one, and you get immediate engagement. Even if it is Monday morning and they haven't had their coffee, that will turn a spark and get people engaged in providing information.
That's when you withhold the coffee, Steve, until you get engagement, and then you give it out to them like, oh, and then here's your reward. You get your coffee now.
So sugar first, so the donuts and the sweets.
Yeah. I think that those are important questions, and framing it obviously in a very abrupt way gets people like, oh, they're not just about the professionalism that goes along with that, or they're not just there to. It's I'm trying to be real and figure out what the real problem is, and we can bypass some of that and just break it down more into a one-on-one level, because you're talking to me. You're not, we can fix it, maybe we can't, but it's, to me, one of those things that I think leads into the engagement a little bit easier than if you're like, so you got your pad and paper, like, what do you want?
Yeah, it's a little bit like, there was a phase where people used to say customer service meant giving the customer what they want. And fortunately, I think we're past that, right? A lot of people who are consultants, right, are afraid to consult. And that's a big thing. And obviously it's an art, and you have to be careful as to how you do it. But to your point, that doesn't mean walking on eggshells all the time. Sometimes you have to ask the difficult questions, and sometimes you have to shake things up a little bit. You just have to know when to do it and when not to do it, and understand the organization. And that's, to me, that's the important part, is really, you could say the same thing in two different organizations, and one would go over really, really well, and the other one you'd be escorted out, right?
You just described my
knowing your client.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And also, as it relates to engagement, having that interaction ahead of time or as you start, you're not coming in saying, okay, so this is what they're telling us we need to do. This is what the project's about. The users don't like to hear that, because it means decisions are already made and they're along for the ride.
Well, yeah. Why am I here? You're going to tell me what you want me to do anyway.
Yeah. So getting that engagement of what do you hate doing Mondays?
Yeah.
It at least presents the idea that you want to help them, and there's opportunity as long as you listen and have that conversation.
Well, I absolutely agree. I think the other important thing is, if you can be the best listener in the world, right? But if you can't take action and show them some progress, you'll lose them. So you have to be careful that you're not overcommitting either, but it starts by listening, right? And understanding and helping them understand why some things, maybe you're going to come later versus sooner, and what that means. And some things as a consultant certainly aren't up to you, right? Somebody else has to make that decision. I think you have to be transparent with them and help them understand that, you don't have carte blanche coming in the door to do whatever you want to do.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head saying that some consultants are afraid to consult, but I've seen really good consultants that have been put in situations where they weren't supported, so that they were going out and they were doing the consulting the right way, and then or the way that would be engaging or asking those tough questions, etc. But the client's like, I'm not sure I want that, and then they were basically just, the rug was pulled from underneath them, right? And so then of course they're going to be wary the next time they go into an organization and feeling a little bit more self-conscious, like maybe I shouldn't push too hard, maybe do what they tell me to do. And in reality, that client wants someone that's going to push them even more and say, what can this do? Right. So it's that kind of ebb and flow, I think, that I've seen with a lot of consultants. And to me, that drives burnout a little bit where someone's like, well, because they feel like they can't ever get it right when they're walking into the situations.
Yeah, it's again, I don't want to take too much time going down the rabbit hole, but to me, that's one of the best things, right? I learned all about leadership in the military, and the one thing to me that's different that you can't duplicate anywhere else in the world, right, is the level of trust that you have when the person next to you is literally protecting your life and you're responsible for theirs, and it's inherent, right? There's no questions, there's no doubt that they're here to watch your back just like you're here to watch their back, right? And from a leadership perspective, it amazes me how often leaders will put somebody in that position, but then they don't trust their consultant. When a consultant comes back and says, here's what I heard, and it's not what they want to hear, instead of listening to what the consultant who was on the ground, even though they didn't go talk to these people, right? They do what they think is right based on their experience or what they sold the client, right? Because we got a contract, we got to stick to the contract. I don't care what they're saying, rather than listening to that consultant. And it's crazy to me. Why would I have somebody on my team that I didn't trust?
Absolutely.
And I think that creates that exact perfect scenario of a business liaison. I know I've been in that situation myself where it's not to say that it's not sales versus delivery, but there can be things that, when you go into sales like, well, this is what we sold, we can do this. And then as we get further into that, we have more information. On the delivery side, it's like, well, there's just no way we can do either all of that or that to that level in this timeline, or, whatever scenario it might be, right? And so then you have to have those tough conversations of, I understand what was sold, here's where we are. And then the quicker that you can have that conversation, I think builds that trust where now it's like, well, we're going to get what we need overall. It's that switch of, we're all in this together in the same boat and weathering that same storm.
Yeah. And I think, with that in particular, no matter how much requirement gathering you do up front or as an analyst, right? If you've gone in and you've talked to the users and you really feel like you understand what they want, right? Until they see the system and they get their hands on it, more often than not, they don't know what they want, right? Yeah. And they shouldn't be punished for that, because a lot of human beings were just not capable of imagining what might be or what it could do. It's not a skill that a lot of people have. And so I think, trying to put all of that in a box up front and saying, okay, yep, this is exactly what we're going to deliver. This is what's in the contract, and we're not gonna, deviate from that at all, is a recipe for disaster. Because at the end of the day, the project, we call them engagements. We don't even call them projects, right? The engagements really starts when the users start to see things and get their hands on things, because that's when they start to think, oh, could we do this? And what about this? And do we have to do it this way? And those kind of things. They can't imagine that until they see it. And so, again, I think having that effective liaison in there that can bridge that gap and kind of speak their language helps mitigate it a little bit. It doesn't solve it, but it definitely helps. And they're really good at translating back when the user says something, what do they really mean, right? Because they can't always put it in words that the builders understand.
And their frame of reference is often just what they know. They have trouble thinking beyond what they don't know. I had a retrospective this morning, and it was a similar situation. So I had a list of things and questions, and I said, okay, what's your frustration? And they started looking at the board and looking at the items, and I stepped in front of it so they couldn't see it. And I said, this isn't your reference. Think.
Yeah.
When
you're doing your job,
don't look at this, because then you're only going to think about that. Exactly. I can't tell you to think about the white space, because you're not going to understand. So think about the experience and let that come out. Don't look at the board, because you're just going to limit yourself to that. We want an open frame of reference.
Yep.
So Mike, I have a question for you around individual growth and then also professional growth. I think Steve and I have talked about this multiple times, but when you kind of start out in that business analysis role, you end up being a little bit of an order taker until you kind of get your wheels under you, or you get a little bit more familiar with the role to understand what questions to ask, etc. So you say someone wants this, you write it down, you put that in, you write a user story for it, kind of move forward. But what's how do you grow those individual talents and then also push for those more professional skills where they can go in and ramp up somebody from, let's say new off the street to that more liaison position?
So I think for the first one, again, I think as a leader in an organization, right, you've got to create the right environment for your team, create that safe space, trust them, and give them opportunities in that safe space where they can be transparent with you, right? And so to me, a lot of it when I'm training, a new, let's say, college hire, right out of school, how to be a consultant, if you will. It's a combination of really trying to understand the people that you're working with and how they think versus how you think. And we use some tools sometimes to identify different, we actually use personality type tools, right, to identify people and, okay, well, how would this person likely want to be communicated with versus maybe how I want to be communicated with, and try and put things in their terms, right? And then obviously, listening is key, but you can't just sit there quietly and listen. You have to be able to restate what you think they said in a way where you're confirming the message, so we didn't have a miscommunication, between sender and receiver. And then asking those leading questions to, to get them to engage and to have that dialogue and to provide feedback, I think are some of the critical skills. And so, oftentimes we'll do internal exercises where we'll do a mock project, or we'll do things and we'll bring other people in the team that have more experience, put the junior person in them and have them present, to the more experienced people versus making them do it in front of a client first, those kind of things, right? Just fostering the growth in a safe space. And I think, having the right people on your team where there really is that sense of community and collaboration. And it's almost like with my team, if we bring a junior person in, they literally get excited. It's like, oh, let's have fun, right? It's not, oh no, here's the new kid, right? They don't know anything, I got to teach him anything. They don't have that attitude. And it's fun to watch and just kind of see how people interact and grow. And there's, I guess, now over 8 billion people on the planet. We all have our own perspective and our own experience. Nobody's the same. So there's certainly not one size fits all. But I think the biggest thing is nurturing them, but at the same time stretching them a little bit, but giving them opportunities in a safe space. So if they fall down, it's not something that's really going to damage them. It's just a temporary setback and learn from the lesson. The last thing I would say on that is, in my case, my kids get tired of hearing me say this all the time, right? But like if you could go back and talk to yourself 20 years ago, right, especially at my age, it's so many people get hung up on where they want to go and what they see in the future that they forget to live in the present and enjoy the moment that they're in and that learning experience while it's happening, right? We all sit back the next day and are like, man, I wish I would have said this, I wish I would have done that, because we're not in the moment. And it's not easy to do that, but I think if you constantly remind people and put them in situations where they can do that and realize that they're not going to get in trouble, it helps a lot.
I'm curious, do you ever do any retrospective type activities with those new junior people after they've done one of your presentations in that safe space?
So I've got, I think, I'd have to count 6 on my team now that I trained either in 2015 or 2016. So it's constant retrospectives, right? And
Nice.
And because I've known them that long, I'll go back to them and say, remember this project, or remember when we did this, or remember when we did that, right? And it's a huge advantage because we have that shared experience over the years. And there was a break. We haven't worked together consistently for that whole, 8-9 years at this point. But a lot of it we have. And so, having that ability to go back and reference, and it's not a true introspective, Steve, but the point is we have shared successes and shared failures that we can commiserate and everything else. And so when we do a new one, it's a whole lot easier to do that introspective because we've done so many before and have so many interactions in the past.
Excellent. So one of the things that we've been doing for the last few years is when a new person comes on board, we charge them with one of the improvement activities that we have. So one of the things that we say is, you look at us, we're experienced. And the one thing I'll say about it is we all have baggage. So when we look at an instruction sheet, we know everything that we went through. So we're just kind of glossing it. We don't have the experience of going through it the first time. So we want to make sure that this is useful for you as you go through. If you see anything, raise your hand, shoot us an email, let us know, because that means it's not effective, it's not efficient, there's something wrong with it.
That's a really good way to put it. I'd like to think I do something similar, but it's not near as formal and official as what you just said. I might steal that idea, Steve. I like that idea better than what we're doing today. So send me the bill.
I can do that. Bottle of scotch, all done. So one of the things that we like about it is it gets them engaged, because we're now saying you have a voice, you've got an opportunity to capture something that now will live on. And when they're, before there's anything official they can do as far as getting up and running, in order to get there, you need to be able to walk, and being able to have effective materials for your reference, that's critical. So it gives them a little more skin in the game up front to actually engage and to provide feedback that we're going to put live.
Yeah, I like I said, I really like it. This will probably resonate better with AJ than it will with you and some others on the call. But as AJ said, we work in a similar space, and we work a lot with the Microsoft stack, in particular the Power Platform. And Microsoft's pace of change these days is borderline insane.
Yeah.
And it's really kind of impossible to keep up with. We used to have people that were experts on everything, and now you literally can't do that, and it's hard to keep up with any one thing, let alone multiples. And so a lot of times when they roll out a new technology, whether it's a new tool or change or whatever, I'll actually assign that to the new person and have them go learn it and research, because to your point, we all have baggage, and we have our perspectives and the way that we used to do things versus the way that we can do things now. And so it actually helps them build credibility with the team, because even though they're brand new, they now know something that nobody else on the team knows. So that's what we do. But I really like your suggestion, and I think I'm going to incorporate it into some things that we do. Hopefully my newest person isn't listening to the call and doesn't sleep tonight because of it. But
opportunity.
I'll add to that before we move on to the next segment. But the thing I like about fresh fish, newbies, greenies, whatever you want, greenhorns, whatever you want to call them, people that are coming in new, is that they come in and they don't understand, may not understand how everything got built beforehand. So then they come in it from a completely different angle, and then they say, "Oh, well, why don't you just do this?" And then you're looking at this going, "Oh man, that's such a great idea," and they're able to kind of leapfrog some of the things that you would be building out normally, right? So then you would have gone through all this other progression, and they're like, "Oh, if we just did this other thing, it would make it so much easier." And you're like, "Yeah," and then you're a little bit bummed, but at the same time, you're also proud of that individual.
Absolutely.
It gives them an opportunity to speak up.
Yeah,
get used to it. That's what we want.
Yep.
All right, so we are going to go to our next segment, which is the BA hotline. So stick with us.
Let's eavesdrop on the BA hotline and see what provocative project problems are awaiting us. Is your project in hot water? Operators are standing by. Ooh, that's hot.
Right. Back.
I always enjoy that.
I enjoy that too. So I know right now we had some technical issues going into this session, so we're just going to go ahead and ask Mike questions directly, since I doubt that we're going to have a whole lot of folks that are joining in the commentary. But if you do have a question, you can always visit analystsafterdark.com to submit your inquiry into the BA hotline, and we'll answer that live on air and ask our guest your question. So, Mike, I'm going to go in and ask a question. So, what 3 things do you think that a business analyst would need to move from a let's say, standard analyst or an analyst position to that liaison, specifically, either skill set wise or personality or anything?
I think I kind of alluded to it earlier, right? The biggest thing is to not just have an understanding of the business, but maybe have some experience in the business and doing the role. And I've actually seen organizations do that. Is even some organizations, they'll take somebody that was in the role and they'll become the business liaison. But I've also seen organizations take an analyst and actually place them in departments, right? I worked for a company years ago. The president of the organization now was an intern when I worked there, right? And we cycled him through every department in the company. And I would have bet you money, 15 years ago that he was going to end up being a C-level exec at that company after he ran through all of those departments, just based on the feedback and his experience and his findings and things. But I think that's really probably the most critical, is to truly not just understand it, but to be able to either do what they do or certainly understand and communicate to them in their language in a way where there's no question that I'm one of them. It just breaks down so many barriers that a lot of analysts deal with on a regular basis. Number 2, again, is that kind of the interaction and really being able to understand people for who they are and how they want to communicate versus trying to do things your way. And obviously there has to be some degree of compromise, but we all know some people are good at compromise and some people aren't good at compromise, right? So to have that flexibility and resiliency to know the people that are going to compromise and that you can work with, and the ones where you kind of just have to listen to them and then try and translate to the best of your ability what they do. So that human interaction and communication, and that real flexibility, and you're kind of putting your ego aside and just trying to get to the message and forget about how they deliver the message and focus on what they're saying and what they're trying to achieve, right? Is probably the second thing. And then the third thing is, kind of like what we were talking about earlier, is you've got to, in the proper perspective, proper timing, everything else, but you've got to be able to question things, right? You can't be afraid to go to management as appropriate and challenge status quo, or you won't be effective.
Is that where you just go in with, whatever glove you have and smack them in the face and then like it just duel immediately, or is it afterwards?
That's probably not the approach that I would take. It is an approach, but it's probably not the one I would take.
And there's pros and cons to using shock language too.
Yep.
So telling a director that their training is deficient will certainly get their attention. It doesn't mean it's bad. It means there's something missing. And the words that you choose make a difference as far as what that follow-up might be.
Yeah. It's funny, Steve. One of my favorite words in the English language is ignorant. Right? Doesn't mean dumb, doesn't mean incapable, just means you don't know.
Yeah.
Right? But boy, you call somebody ignorant and watch what happens.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. It gets a response. Mm-hmm. You will get engagement. It might not be what you want, but you will get it. So it's just a way to find out how can you get that engagement to be productive, constructive, useful?
Yeah. So if you just sub out ignorant with unaware, it's one of those things that takes something that is charged and it just removes all of that. You're like, oh, I was unaware of that. It's like, well, of course you were unaware. It's okay. It's new, or it's, whatever. And now you're having those conversations at a much different pitch and tone than you would have otherwise.
And that's a great example, AJ, is literally, those two words are literally synonyms for each other, right? But if you use the wrong one, bad things happen. If you use the right one, doors open, right? And that's, that second point when you asked me for 3, right? That ability to communicate to whoever it is in a way that you can effectively communicate. You're not going to set them off. You're not going to close doors and create a barrier. It's really, really important to be successful in the role.
I like that. Well,
You want engagement.
I mean, yeah,
It's got to be productive.
it's fair. And I find this in some of the projects that I work on, but also just in some of the public speaking that I'll do. If I'm telling jokes or if I'm being humorous in that, it's hard not to have engagement from other, like you can't laugh at a situation and not be engaged in the content or engaged in, whatever there is there. So if you keep some of the conversation light, entertaining, and you can have some of that, then it allows people to engage better. And then you can move into the deeper stuff that's heavy because you've already built that trust and that community with them right off the bat.
Some of the best business consultants and executive coaches in the world got their starts in improv.
I think I would probably go the other way now, like as I'm watching my career.
That's because you have all this material to work with now.
I'm gonna have to go into comedy after this. Yeah. Well, thank you, Steve. Do you have any just goofball or off the wall questions for Mike?
Off the wall questions.
There is a wall. There is a wall behind you. So
it's true.
I'm usually bouncing off of them. Not at the moment. I'll get there.
All right.
I'll get there.
Well, then, again, if you do have questions, you can always go to analystsafterdark.com, submit your own query into the BA hotline, and then we'll get to ask guests live. And I think that's always more fun when somebody else comes up with a question. It's like, ooh, a question. And then we get a chance to put somebody else in the hot seat. Then that takes us now to our next segment.
And now it's time for BA Confessions.
All right. So, Mike, we had talked about this in the green room a little bit in prep for this show about confessions and some of the things that either have made or broken business liaison, business analysts in the past. And I think you had a couple of great scenarios that you were going to share. So
yeah, I mean, again, transparently for the audience, I was a little nervous when you were asking for confessions because I wasn't sure where we were going with that. So framing it helped a lot. But yeah, the two examples that we talked about, one was a situation where the business analyst and the PMO, we were in a meeting and project wasn't going well. And they started pointing fingers at each other, right? And it got really, really heated to the point where they both stood up out of their seats and were calling each other's names. And it got very, very unprofessional quickly. And there were 3 consultants in the room, and I don't remember exactly, but I'll say 10 or 12 folks from the client side. And I'm guessing that this kind of interaction may have happened before because they all just sat there and watched. And I couldn't do that. So I just stood up and I said, ladies, I don't think this is the right time or place? Can we maybe take this into another room kind of thing? And they just stopped. And, it was one of those moments that could have gone a lot of different directions, but I just literally, I couldn't sit there and watch it. I mean, I felt bad for both of them, and it wasn't going anywhere. Obviously it wasn't productive. So, that was a not fun moment, but, and I will tell you, they ended up ultimately scrapping the project. So the project never went live.
Wow.
It wouldn't have mattered what we did. Not it. Wouldn't have mattered what we did. It wouldn't have gone live anyway. It was, they had some big organizational challenges.
Did
Go
you
ahead.
all place bets on the board? Is that why you said a different room, so that way you could just gather the cash right there and then see who was going to win, or was different?
It was literally the reaction in the moment. I don't know if that was a good idea or not, but I was just trying to stop the argument and let things cool off a little bit. So, I think the other example that I gave you was the joys of what happens when you're mid engagement, and for one reason or another, the business liaison is no longer part of the engagement or part of the organization. And that definitely throws a huge wrinkle in plans and everything else. And at least most of the organizations that I work with, they don't have, multiple people in that role. Usually there's one business liaison, maybe a handful of analysts, but there's very rarely more than one business liaison. And so that was a huge void to fill. And they offered it to us, and we politely declined to try and fill that role. So that also, from an engagement perspective, kind of put things to a grinding halt.
It's understandable.
I think I've been in both of those scenarios myself. The one when you mentioned it was that kind of sales versus delivery. Somebody else had said, hey, and they had vouched for the organization, said, hey, this is a great organization. They're going to do us right and all this other stuff. And then I came in saying, yeah, so there's some things we had to cut out immediately, whatever. And then they pulled us into a room, and there was a person that was sitting catty corner, and just, all of those 4-letter words that you're not supposed to ever say in a business meeting came directed at me. And I'm just like, hey, listen, I'm trying to explain it. We had a scheduled happy hour that night with the client, everybody else. And so I had, 4 separate apologies. Like, we don't do business like this. This is not us, etc. It's like, what? I get it. This is not the first time that's happened to me. It's the most memorable or the most recent, but it wasn't the most, it happens all the time. I feel like that's what happens when you get into these roles. Like, there's so much rolling into these big expenses, and careers are either made or broken based on some of these rollouts. So it does take someone that's, as you mentioned, deft in experience, also communication, and then being able to push out words of ignorance versus unaware in a way like, okay to say it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh,
Last call.
It's last call. So you know what that means? It means that it is time for us to take all of the things that we've learned today and roll them up. And thank you so much for being on our show today. This has been amazing. I know we kind of rolled out a little bit later than normal, but it's always a pleasure talking with you. For those that don't know, I count Mike as one of my mentors. So we talk not too frequently, but when we do, it's a chance to I think big brain things about world problems or what's going on, or at least we solve them and then we go on with our daily lives. Yeah. Unfortunately, we don't implement them right away. We just solve them. So, yeah. But no, I've always appreciated your commentary, insight, and just your general outlook on how we should probably all work together, collaborate. So thank you so much for our show.
Thank you. Appreciate the kind words. Appreciate you having me. Always great to chat with you, Steve. Good to chat with you. And
Great chatting with you.
Stay in touch, gentlemen.
So, Mike, where can we find you outside of this? So, if we wanted to have other conversations, if people wanted to like reach out to you directly, talk about business liaisonship, the word I just made up, and
Right.
yeah.
So LinkedIn,
Okay.
the LinkedIn profile is just, there you go. It's just Hauck, again, phonetically pronounced H-O-W-K, but it's H-A-U-C-K because my ancestry is German, is what it is. That's one way. Email is just mike@congruentx.com. It's really simple. That's, again, one of the perks of being one of the founders. You get to make up your own emails, just like you get to make up your own title.
Nice.
And then I actually just started my own, I hesitate to call it a podcast just yet. We're kind of working on it, but the first episode is up on YouTube as of today. And it's, the URL is howtochange.us. So Steve, if you work with me, right, it's how to change us. See how that works? Huh?
Yep.
Right? Yeah, so just howtochange.us.
All right, wonderful. Well, Mike, thank you again so much. This has been a lot of fun. It's always good talking with you. Steve, what do we have coming up?
Coming up in our next show, we have a returning guest, our first returning guest, Coach Vic. Vic Nichols will be coming to us talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion in analysis.
I love it. I'm excited for that. So, he's always just electric when you talk to him.
Absolutely.
He brings all of the energy. It's just literally all of it. It comes. So I'm excited to talk to him. And it's always good to talk about analysis. You know, we find that there's biases that we all come in. So I'm curious to hear his thoughts on that and how we can maybe apply different things in analysis and different tricks and tools and what we can do to get more, I don't know, just be more accepting. So thank you, everybody. This is our show. This is Analysts After Dark, reminding you to stay curious
And stay positive.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, guys. Have a good night.